And so, how many of you ever seen Room of the Titans? Actually, Emma's dad, Emma Collins, Emma's dad actually went to school at T.C. Williams. Yeah. That's a true story. Do you know what year that was about?
86.
It was 1970. That's 16 years after Brown. So schools are going to be integrated, but it's going to take a long time. And there are still cities where integration, obviously it happens, but busing is there. We'll talk about forced busing. Integration is still an issue. Race is still an issue for parents with some of these schools. And we'll talk more about it. It's not really an issue here for white kids because this joint's almost all white. So you guys don't see race as much. If you're a black person and you walk into the school for the first time, what would you think? A lot of white people in the school, right? You guys don't walk in thinking, I'm white, I'm white, I'm white, I'm white, oh my God, I'm so white, I'm white, I'm white. Because this is your reality. If you walked in here and you were black, you'd be thinking, man, a lot of white people walking around this joint, right? So for you guys, race isn't as much of an issue. How many black kids in the school? 25 maybe? Well, but that's a stereotype because what you're doing is you're saying that acting a certain way culturally means something, right? They're more rural. They're rural kids. I think what you'll find is it's less about race and it's more just about sort of cultural stuff. So let's talk about the response to Brown versus Board. The response is almost as historically important as what actually happened. By the way, what court case essentially did Brown overturn? Plessy versus Ferguson. They're overturning legal segregation, right? So Plessy versus Ferguson is overturned. So then what we're going to have, the response to Brown is going to be absurd. It's called massive resistance. And states go all in. Virginia, by the way, actually banned any public school from existing if if you integrated in Virginia, you got no state or federal funding. You had no state funding. How long can a school stay in business if it has no state funding? About 25 minutes. So essentially they're saying, if you integrate, we're going to close your school down. And one thing that's going to happen in cities is also something called white flight schools. And this is important. Sometimes you see this on exams. White flight schools. In small southern towns all over the South, white private schools started popping up. And so schools started becoming segregated more along the line of class. In a town that I was in South Carolina up until I was in second grade, there was a public school which is 75 or 80% black, and there was a white flight private school. It wasn't like even a great school. It was just a school where black people didn't go. It was in the 80s. It wasn't like this was 1926. It was a highly segregated. South Carolina is highly segregated still today. Not legally segregated, but it was called de facto segregated. And literally, you drove down the main drag, and if you hung a left at one of the turns, you were black. And if you hung a right, you were white. There was a white world and a black world. And a lot of small southern towns have de facto segregation because they have that. Or you'll have, like in towns like Birmingham or a little bit bigger southern towns, you'll have suburban schools pop up where whites are only people there, or blacks are sort of encouraged not to go there for legal reasons or whatever. So there's that. By 1962, you don't have to write this down, but just give you a fact. By 62, which was 8 years after Brown, only 1/2 of 1% of the schools in the South were integrated. 1/2 of 1%. So that's not a lot. The biggest the biggest thing that was going to be at Little Rock. How many of you guys have ever heard of the Little Rock Nine before? In 1957 in Little Rock, this is the first big test of segregation, of integration in the South. Central High School was big. It was a couple thousand kids. And there was obviously a black school in Little Rock. There was a white school in Little Rock. And a bunch of black parents wanted to enroll their children in Central School because it was better. It got better stuff. It got better books. It got better everything, right? And at the beginning of the summer, a whole bunch of African American kids had enrolled. Now it's important now that you learn about two groups. There are essentially two racist groups. Well, there's a lot of racist groups in the South. One of whom was like the Democrats. But there were two like organizations that you could belong to in the South that were openly racist. One was the KKK, which you've heard about, and one was something called the White Citizens Council.
Aren't they still around today?
The Klan is. I don't know if the White Citizens Council is open. I don't know about that. Because they were out in the open. The Klan was a little more clandestine. The Klan was like the blue collar racist, right? These were people who oftentimes weren't as educated, were more violent. They're kind of like the enforcement mechanism. The White Citizens Council, these are oftentimes like your police chiefs, your doctors, your lawyers, business owners, stuff like that, government officials. And they were just as troublesome. They weren't violent, but what they did actually maybe even had more effect. So, for example, one of the people in the White Citizens Council in Little Rock ran the Little Rock paper. And they found out all the black kids who wanted to go to school at Central High School. And the newspaper published the name and address of every black child trying to integrate to school. Now, again, is that, shooting a black kid? No, but what's it going to do?
Lead to violence.
It's going to incite fear. Oftentimes what's going to happen is, let's say that you want to integrate your kid into a school. Your boss was probably going to be a white guy, and he might say something like, well, you know what, Andrew, you've been a pretty good employee here, but they didn't want to say you were wrong, it was your troublemaker. Why do you want to make all this trouble? Aren't things getting better? This is something, seems like there's a lot of trouble you're causing here. Why don't you not integrate your kid? And maybe we'll have a job for you. But we might have to be laying off, and I just hate for you to get laid off if something like this happens. So they're using economic power over African Americans. That is what the White Citizens Council can do. Political power, economic powers. So in 57, by the end of the summer, but back then, in fact, probably even when your parents were in school, when did school start? The day after Labor Day, right? School was from Labor Day to Memorial Day. It's a great time to be alive, right? Labor Day, we're almost in school when I first started, a couple of years ago, we started on the 2nd or 3rd of August. And went, yeah. Well, we go up on this 8th grade or something like that when it happened?
It was ridiculous, yeah. We started ridiculously early. We also got out like the 19th or something, though.
Yeah, but no, we had snow that year, so we didn't, that year we had 2 months. But then last year we started later, and then we got out so last summer was a little bit. But summers for teachers used to be a lot different. We used to went to work quite a bit in the summer, not a lot, but I'm not complaining. We have lots of days off. And we get paid a ton of money, so.
Yes.
Andrew knows you guys live in a $700,000 mansion, right? I say, a bunch of your parents. How many parents are teachers or have worked in the school system? All right. Well, there you go. So you guys know how rich teachers are. Your mom worked at Cal for a few years, right?
Yeah.
But that was just like a part-time job, though, for her, wasn't it?
No, that was full-time teaching.
Oh, did she do that
She
for a
was
while?
a science teacher. Yeah, I think the only good thing there was that your kids get a discount.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sam and Amanda, when she gets snow days off, she says that he gets up and angrily stomps around the house for 2 hours before he goes to work.
That's what Kelly's always worked, and other than when she worked here for 6 years, because a lot of you guys had her, but for a long time, she worked in the school districts, and Anderson's always got out faster. When I don't have to work and she does, she's furious. Because I do not like being at home when I can't work. I prefer to work than not work. But Kelly is all about staying at home. So when she has to stay at home, or have to work and I don't, she's really mad. All right. So Little Rock 9, on the first day of school, these 9 kids finally show up. Right? And when they show up, what do you think's waiting on them?
Big angry
Jumping.
a mob, right? A bunch of parents are there with horrible signs, the N-word, Confederate flags all over the place. But something else they didn't anticipate. The National Guard was there guarding the front doors. Literally, not only do they have to go through screaming parents, these are adults who are screaming horrible things at children, but they also are met by men with rifles with bayonets on them. And they turn around and go back home. Now, you're Eisenhower. What's your problem? What's the dilemma that you're going to face?
Well, it's the National Guard, and I mean, like, it was a federal thing. You know, we said to integrate schools, and then the National Guard, he was also federal.
National Guard is actually state, unless the president has to federalize them. So they're kind of like the governor's army, unless the president wants them. But you're right, it is a federal court decision, right? But the state's getting in the way of it. In fact, they're physically getting in the way of it. So there's some conflict. So they go back home. And there's all this discussion. And a few days later, Eisenhower federalizes the National Guard. And he brings in the 101st Airborne out of Kentucky. And every single child has his or her own 101st Airborne paratrooper that walks him or her through school.
Awesome.
Armed.
Awesome, but also really sad.
And that might sound, now there are people who, obviously a lot of those people are still around. And you can go on YouTube and see some of the stuff they talked about. And they felt protected, but they also, they felt like they were secure when they were there. But they couldn't go everywhere, and eventually they left. And these kids got beat up all the time. Their books were stolen, burned in front of them. Their lockers were vandalized. Kids were beat up a lot. And this is the thing about the Civil Rights Movement. It's not just the fact that they stood up and went. What's the big thing about the Civil Rights Movement? What is it about making progress? Everybody gets knocked down. They kept getting up. They kept going, and they kept going, and they kept going. The governor for Arkansas wasn't even that, I mean, he was a segregationist in that a lot of white people have segregationists, but he was not like, he hadn't run as an I'm an only segregationist guy until this happened. His name was Orville Faubus. Orville Faubus, in Arkansas, by the way, the governors used to get elected every 2 years. That changed in the 1980s or 90s. But every 2 years, the governor's mansion could change hands. Orville Faubus wasn't particularly popular as a candidate. But once he became a segregationist and he stood up to the federal government trying to integrate schools in Arkansas, what happened to him? He kept on getting elected. And he stood up to Eisenhower. He got in front of the school and he said that this is the government overreach, that what we're moving towards is, a too powerful of a government where the states don't have any rights. He's calling gloom and doom in 1957, but they're integrated. And when there was only one senior amongst the black students, and when that senior graduated and walked across the stage, there was absolute silence. Not a single person clapped. And the guy got done and he walked off the stage, and he went home for his graduation party, and his parents said, I want to introduce you to a guy who's come to your graduation. His name is Martin Luther King. And King came to this guy's graduation. King was famous, but he wasn't king yet. And he was at this kid's graduation as a surprise and as a present. Pretty awesome, yeah. That guy who did that, the only one who he's going on. He went to Michigan State. He got a master's at Michigan State, and he's a really successful businessman now. And the reason he wanted to do it is he wanted a better chance in society, and he knew that Central Arkansas was ironic that Central High School in Little Rock was going to give him a better opportunity.
Yeah, really.
But there you go. And that's the story of Little Rock. And most of you will never know what these kids' names are. But how important are they to our country's history? This is it. I mean, this is what the civil rights is. Most of us can't name anybody beyond, I'm a freaking history teacher, and this is one of the things I'm good at, and I can't name any more than 50 civil rights leaders. How many people participate in the civil rights movement? 50. I can't name you 25 probably of the era. That's not true. But not that many. And millions of people participated. that's what made the civil rights movement special, because everyone had a part. Today in Congress, one of the most important, arguably the most important black person in Congress, that's not true, he's by far the most important black person in Congress, is named John Lewis. And he was a activist in the 50s and 60s, and he was beaten by the Klan a couple times, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that he did. And he's from Georgia, and he gets elected all the time. And he's one of those guys, like when you see President Obama walking down, you know, you see the presidents walking up and down the stage, you know, like this State of the Union, he's shaking everybody's hand, and everybody wants his autograph and stuff. John Lewis has so much stroke in Congress, presidents go and find him. Right, he'll stand there and he'll shake everybody's hand, he'll kind of wave to people, but when Barack Obama goes by, he's looking for John Lewis. John Lewis ain't looking for him. John Lewis is a towering figure still. And so if you are a black congressman or a black leader, you go to John Lewis first. And you make sure. In fact, one thing that helped Barack Obama in the primaries was John Lewis was a big, big fan of Clinton's. Big Bill Clinton guy, big Hillary Clinton guy. And then he ended up in the primaries deciding that Barack Obama probably had a better shot. He switched, he endorsed. Everybody wants John Lewis's endorsement. Because when you get endorsed by John Lewis, basically you're saying, this guy endorses me, I've got to be pretty good. But when he did Barack Obama, the Clintons were really, really upset. Because basically they knew they just lost the black vote. And the Clintons used to dominate the black vote. Bill Clinton got 96% of the black vote when he ran for president. Maya Angelou called Clinton the first black president. But John Lewis is a big, big deal, and he was there then. Okay, what's next?